everyone, and welcome to this last edition of Inside Africa for the week. We begin from North Africa, where new pictures have emerged from last week's hostage crisis in Algeria just moments before the government launched their attack. According to one local journalist, 11 workers at the compound were actually helping the attackers. Meanwhile, the Japanese government has confirmed that further 2 of its citizens were involved.
Life inside the Ain Amenas compound during the hostage crisis. These pictures were apparently filmed by an Algerian worker held against his will. They show some of the chaotic scenes before the gun battles between the kidnappers and government forces. More than 700 people worked at the facility, including 130 foreigners. One Algerian journalist has told Al Jazeera that 11 workers at the complex were actually helping the hostage takers, giving them a detailed plan of the layout. The operation to end the siege killed many, including Algerians and dozens of foreigners. Several countries criticized the Algerian government's decision to act without consulting them. The Japanese government highlighted the lack of information it was given, but put the blame for the deaths on the kidnappers.
Whatever the cause, using violence is unforgivable. We strongly condemn these terrorist acts.
Officials in Tokyo have now confirmed that 2 more Japanese hostages were killed, ending the agonizing wait for news for 2 families.
I just want to see him. I want to see him quickly.
It's believed that the security setup at Ain Amenas did not include armed guards, which may have slowed down the attackers. Algerian law bans any armed foreign security personnel from operating at plants like this. But now, some of the big companies might be looking for that to change.
Over in Egypt, protesters have clashed with riot police in Cairo on the 2nd anniversary of the start of the Egyptian uprising, which led to the downfall of Hosni Mubarak. Police used tear gas on protesters, calling for the overthrow of President Mohamed Morsi. Further protests are expected after Friday prayers.
Familiar scenes on the streets of Cairo. Security forces fire tear gas as they try to disperse anti-government protesters. They've been trying to reach government buildings, including Parliament, and called for President Morsi's downfall. On the anniversary of Egypt's uprising, many feel the revolution hasn't achieved everything it should have and blame the new president.
By attacking protesters with tear gas, he proves that he wants to escalate the situation. He should know that the Egyptian people aren't scared. The Egyptian people are not afraid of him.
It's 2 years since these violent protests led to the downfall of President Hosni Mubarak after 30 years in power. Many Egyptians argue that the problems they faced then are the same as those threatening the country now. Top of the list, a lack of freedom and a poor standard of living. The troubled economy has been hamstrung by the political instability. The falls in tourism and foreign investment are 2 priorities for the government to work on at the World Economic Forum in Davos.
This is a transitional period after the revolution, after a dictatorship of 30 years of going all the time the wrong way in the economic decisions. So we're trying to fix all these things one at a time.
The government's other challenges include the poor state of much infrastructure, such as railways and apartment blocks, the controversial new constitution, passed by a referendum but undermined by low turnout, and the divide between secular and Islamist groups, each competing for their own vision of the future.
After the revolutions, countries takes around 8 to 10 years to stabilize. 2 to 3 months we'll have the final parliamentary elections. The whole democratic process will be in place. So 2 years and a half. I think this is very good considering what happened.
But many remain frustrated. Security has been stepped up around the country, with opposition groups calling for more protests as they continue to push for greater reforms and freedoms.
Now, a group of Malian fighters say they want talks to end the French-led offensive in the north after splitting from the main rebels force. The breakaway faction of Ansar al-Din said in a statement that it rejected all forms of extremism and terrorism and was committed to fighting them.
Malian troops may be at war with rebel groups, but an organisation based in Paris called the International Federation for Human Rights says they're also using tactics that violate a global code of conduct. The group wants observers sent in as part of a UN Security Council resolution to protect human rights. They say Malian troops need better training. The French have sent 2,300 troops to Mali. They've just released this video showing airstrikes on 2 rebel bases in northern Mali. The army has confirmed the attacks. It's part of a campaign to take back the north from rebels. And now some of the rebels appear to be backing down. Members of Ansar ad-Din say they've set up a breakaway group that's willing to talk rather than fight. They say they want a peaceful solution. A former leader of Ansar ad-Din told Malian radio station RFI they'll be known as the Islamic Movement for Azawad, the part of northern Mali that rebels took from the government and now control under strict Islamic law. They say they want a peaceful solution and want to distance themselves from Al-Qaeda's North African wing, also fighting in Mali.
Thank you.
The new group says it's already been in touch with mediators from Algeria and Burkina Faso. But it could be a last-ditch attempt to appear moderate by a rebel group losing ground to an international force.
It is 68 years now since soldiers from Ghana and other West African countries joined with the Allied forces to repel the Japanese forces in the Battle of Myang in Burma. The commemoration of the occasion saw the Veterans Association teaming up with the 2nd Battalion of Infantry Barracks at Takoradi to pay homage to the World War II heroes.
Myang Day is marked annually in remembrance of the gallant soldiers of the Royal West African Frontier Forces who fought the Battle of Myang in 1945 and emerged victorious. The Royal West African Frontier Force was formed by a unit drawn from Nigeria, the then Gold Coast, Sierra Leone, and the Gambia. The West African troops defeated the Japanese soldiers without loss of lives at Myang. It was the ancient capital of the Alkanese kings, which lies in the valley of the river Kaladan, a river in the eastern Mizoram state of India. The ceremony attracted a number of dignitaries from within the Ghana Armed Forces and civil society. 26 veteran soldiers, some of whom took part in the Battle of Myang, thrilled the gathering with a march past. Also on parade were contingents drawn from the Ghana Army, the Navy, and the Air Force.
Quick! March!
There was the military exercise of piling of drums and laying of colors, whilst flags were hoisted to fly at half-mast. Christian and Muslim prayers were said in memory of the gallant soldiers who lost their lives during the battle. The guest of honor at the ceremony, Lieutenant General retired L.A. Okai, who was the former national chairman of the Veterans Association of Ghana, spoke about the importance and significance of the Veterans Association of Ghana.
It behoves us, therefore, to show our appreciation by uniting and planning with members of our communities and mandated public entities to support our localities, our local and traditional authorities, and the nation.
The last post was then sounded in remembrance of the departed soldiers.
Moving on, South Africa's government is looking to nuclear power for its future energy demands, but the preferred site of its first new nuclear power station is on land that is culturally sensitive to the Khoisan, an indigenous tribe who are determined to fight the development.
Khoisan were the original inhabitants of southern Africa. For at least 2,000 years, they hunted, herded, and gathered from the land and the sea. Hetty Boyson is from the Hamkwa tribe. Along the stretch of coastline, there are fishing traps built by her ancestors, skeletons in the sand, and evidence of what and where they ate.
Maybe some of it, they take the food out of the
The Khoisan's land was seized by colonialists. Under apartheid, their identity was further fractured. But Boyson says the proposal to build a nuclear power station here is unacceptable.
They take our land. They already take our identity away from us, the animals, everything that we've got, they take away from us. And now what is left for us is only our history.
The poison sticking to it.
These artefacts were all collected here. Boyson and her husband, who's a traditional healer, are trying to preserve a culture they say isn't respected. They don't have formal First Nation Indigenous status yet. Tony Stott is from Eskom, the electricity company that will build the power station if the project is approved by the government.
There are other people and other communities who do want it there. So, you know, it's certainly not for Eskom by itself to say, well, that community is right and this community is wrong. That's why we have an environmental impact assessment process.
Nuclear power now meets only 6% of South Africa's needs. By 2030, the government wants it to contribute 22%.
We already try everything and we talk to all the stakeholders, but they don't want to listen to us.
Putting a nuclear reactor on land sacred to her tribe will only alienate the Hamkwa further.
Let's now make a shift over to East Africa, and our first stop is in Uganda, where we begin by talking health. 2 people have died and a dozen others hospitalized following a cholera outbreak at the border post of a day in Panyimo sub-county in Nebi district. Last year, the contagious disease affected nearly 500 people, with 40 dying. Since last month, health workers have reported repeat admissions at a day health center to where an isolation facility has been set up.
2 people have died at day landing site in Panyimo sub-county in Nebi district following a sporadic cholera outbreak that started last month. An isolation unit has already been established at Day Health Center 2, where 7 patients are currently admitted. Health workers at the unit told NTV that the area has already been cordoned off and no caretaker is allowed into the facility.
People not to enter inside to the patients. And again, they feel very lazy sometimes and they are very weak, they cannot sit up. That is why we now improvise and put a straw where they could at least access and they take ORS.
9 more cholera patients are hospitalized at Day Health Center 3. The health officials also attribute the continued cholera outbreak in the region to the cross-border movement of people between Congo and Uganda.
Mostly the outbreak where we get here when there is an outbreak in Congo. So, you know, there is that cross-border movement where people comes from Congo. There are some family which lives in Congo and there are some which are in Uganda. So that inter-movement.
The people here associating the disease with witchcraft, and some sprinkle ash at the entrance of their houses to allegedly ward off enemy's fortune. Yet the sanitation at the site is wanting. A quick survey of the area shows that there are very few latrines and uncovered food items are sold by the roadside.
So the majority of the population, they are uneducated. So there is really need to sensitize this community. And even across the border, they should be aware. The problem we face, the few population we get at the unit, much as we give them health education, but it's not enough.
Last year, over 40 people at the landing site succumbed to cholera, while about 500 were successfully treated.
We are still in Uganda, but now we talk something else besides cholera. At least 1 child dies every week in Uganda in an incident of child sacrifice. This is according to a report released by Humane Uganda in child sacrifice and mutilation of children in Uganda. The report defines child sacrifice as the harmful practice of removing a child's body parts, blood or tissue while the child is alive. It reveals that child sacrifice is on the increase, mainly because communities have placed a high demand on this body parts.
One of the most publicized child sacrifice cases is that of Joseph Kasirie, a 12-year-old boy who was murdered in 2008. Kasirie's head and private parts were cut off and have to date never been recovered. In July last year, businessman Gatoka Jubi was sentenced to life imprisonment over this murder. This is one of the few cases that have actually had their time in court. The report released today shows that child sacrifice has been on a steady rise from 2009 to 2012, and the most common body parts missing are the tongue, female and male genitalia, blood, legs, and the entire head. The report shows that more girls than boys have been mutilated, and that children between the ages of 3 to 18 are sacrificed more than adults. Poverty is listed as the strongest driver for human sacrifice, with people consulting witch doctors for help. There is also the deep-rooted belief that use of body parts, blood and tissue in traditional medicine make it stronger and more powerful. But several traditional healers do not consider the use of human body parts as part of traditional medicine.
You can't protect life, save life by killing another. Removing one life to protect another, it's not proper.
While the blame has always been placed on witch doctors and their agents, the focus this time is on the communities that have adopted the belief that sacrificing a child will solve their problems.
Will community members be prepared when they realise, when they're brought face to face with the fact that their visit to a so-called witch doctor results in the mutilation of a child that may come from their own community?
Those that are against the practice have, according to the report, lost trust in the authorities because they say the officers are easily bribed and suspects set free, while others say they have to bribe the authorities for them to look into cases where their loved ones were victims. But the police say this report is not accurate.
The report is full of speculation, is not based on facts, and at best it is actually full of lies.
The report recommends that the draft action plan on child sacrifice be endorsed and implemented, and traditional healers against the practice be co-opted to fight against it.
Police in Kenya are investigating an incident in which a judge was carjacked and robbed at her house Wednesday night. High Court Judge Grace Nzioka was accosted by a gang of 6 as she drove into her compound in Karen. The gang made away with personal possessions and electronics, including a laptop with a copy of a report of the Judicial Commission inquiry on the Tana Delta.
High Court Judge Grace Nzioka was returning home from work at 9:30 p.m. in a government vehicle. Her driver drove into the compound of the house in Karen without any inkling of what awaited them behind the gates.
As I was getting out of the car, I suddenly realized there was someone standing next to the door. They ordered me to get out. They ordered me to not to carry anything and walk into the house. So they walked along, took us, me, the driver, and the officer we were with to the house and ordered us to lie down.
The gang then went on to confiscate valuables, including iPads and 2 laptops. They also collected ATM cards and pins, which they used to withdraw money from various bank accounts. The 6 gang members would terrorize the household until 2 in the morning, when they loaded the valuables into 2 cars, one of which belonged to Nzioka, and drove off with the judge and her husband.
And because they didn't have a car, they loaded the items into 2 vehicles, the GK and our vehicle. And they asked me and my husband to come along with them so that if they decided they're not going to keep the vehicles, we'll drive them back.
The 2 were set free just after Dagoretti and allowed to drive home in their car. But the timing of the incident raises eyebrows. It came just before the High Court judge and her team were set to release a report on the Tana Delta clashes. The report saved on one of the laptops carried away by the thieves.
I think it's an ordinary robbery unless the investigations reveal otherwise. So we shouldn't have any cause of alarm. We'll get the report.
It is not clear why the judge did not have armed security detail at the time of the attack. No suspect has been arrested over the incident.
We conclude with this one that concerns Kenya and Somalia. Kenya is now set to reopen its embassy in the Somali capital, Mogadishu. The Kenyan ambassador designate to Somalia, Josephat Maikara, has presented his credentials to the president of Somalia at Villa Somalia in Mogadishu. President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud has welcomed the initiative by Kenya, which closed its mission in Somalia at the fall of Siad Barre regime in 1991 following a protracted civil war.
After several years of diplomatic absence inside Somalia, Kenya wants to reestablish its embassy in Mogadishu.
His Excellency President Mike Kibaki, President of the Republic of Kenya, has appointed me to be the next ambassador extraordinary and the plenipotentiary of the Republic of Kenya.
And with that, the newly appointed Kenyan ambassador to Somalia, Joseph Maikara, presented his credentials to the President of Somalia at his official residence in Mogadishu. President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud welcomed the initiative by Kenya.
We have no historical animosity or historical bad incidents in the past. We have always been together, and we have a lot of links and a lot of issues, a lot of means that link the two countries together.
In a statement that he read in front of the Somali president, the Kenyan ambassador to Somalia hinted the need to work out modalities of safe and orderly repatriation of refugees. There are currently an estimated 500,000 Somalis in Kenya. Most of them are refugees living in camps run by the United Nations.
We agreed that my government will be working hard on the best possible means that this refugee returns home in an orderly manner, according to the standards of the United Nations conventions.
The new ambassador may have been given the go-ahead to represent Kenya in Somalia, but there is no office space just yet. His relocation to Mogadishu will have to wait for a few more months. The Somalia president has also offered to look for a space of land in which Kenya can build its own embassy. Turkey was the first country to reopen its embassy in Mogadishu in November 2011. Other countries such as Libya, Iran and Egypt followed suit. Kenya and Somalia's relationship is far more intertwined than most other African countries. Insecurity across the border in Somalia has also affected Kenya. In October 2011, Kenya military tanks rolled into Somalia to fight the militant group the Al-Shabaab. But despite the recent security gains made, the African Union troops are still dealing with the impact of the Al-Shabaab. The group has said it will kill all Kenyan hostages it's holding if the Kenyan government doesn't free all Muslims held on terror charges within a period of 3 weeks. Just a few days ago, the Al-Shabaab executed a French secret agent it was holding for more than 3 years after a failed rescue attempt by French special forces.
As far as Mogadishu, as you guys have seen, things have changed positively. There's peace and stability coming back.
Back in Mogadishu, this city was once referred to as the Rome of Africa, but the events of the last 2 decades of death and destruction shook the residents of this seaside city to the core. With a new president and a constitution in place, things are looking up. Somalia, it seems, is ready to do business with the international community.
It is on that note that we come to the end of this edition of Inside Africa. Thanks for always taking our time to be with us. And while hoping to be with you again Monday, do have a pleasant weekend in the company of programs on AFRIQUEMEDIA.